This podcast is a part of the series Listening to Canberra Voices and will cover the topic of filmmaking in Canberra. This podcast is produced by the Faculty of Arts and Design, University of Canberra 2023.
I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples who are the traditional custodians of the Canberra area and pay respect to the elders past and present of all Australia's Indigenous peoples.
Lights, camera, action.
Hello everyone and welcome to Listening to Canberra Voices. Today we bring you an episode of Lights, Camera, Action. I'm Sophie.
And I'm Jacquie.
And we will be your host this morning. Today we are joined by Jake Lacy, a Canberra film student hailing from New Jersey, USA. Good morning, Jake.
Good morning. Thank you guys so much for asking me to do this.
No worries at all. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. So, Jake, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to Canberra?
My name's Jake. I'm a 20-year-old film student at UC. I'm a second-year film student. So I moved to Sydney, Australia at the end of 2018 by my dad's work. I finished high school there. And then I really wanted to study film. I found my love of film in Sydney, and I was, applying to universities. And, UC had a really good practical film program, so I decided to, come here and do that. I'm a writer-director primarily, but the good thing about this degree is you get to explore all different aspects of film, cinematography, lighting, sound. But yeah, writing, directing is my mainstay at this point. I'm a part of the UC Film Society. I'm the vice president, and I host Off Camera, which is our Film Society radio show with two of my friends in the Film Society as well. That's been really fun. So I've been able to get all aspects of film in there and, even talking about film on the radio show.
So what can you tell us about being a host of a podcast?
It's been so much fun. I've always loved listening to podcasts, especially about like movies, which I am obsessed with. Going into this year, Ollie texted the Film Society chat and was like, is anyone interested in doing like a radio show? And I was so into it. I love talking about movies with my friends, and I thought it would be a great outlet to, focus conversations about movies into segments, which we do on the show. We talk about different movies. We do games revolving around movies. We talk about movie news. We talk about upcoming releases. It's been really fun to kind of, channel those conversations into something that actually goes out into the world. I'm not just having these random conversations with my friends. It's also been fun getting that experience to like talk professionally about movies, as like that's kind of something I want to do in the future as well. If I'm not making movies, like I love writing and talking about movies, and I do have interest in movie criticism. So it's been good learning and kind of focusing my skills in that lens as well, because we do talk about like our thoughts on movies while also, playing different games and, having fun conversations about movies. So it's a good balance of, seriousness and, just a bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have listened to the podcast and I know what my favorite episode is, but I'm curious to hear what your favorite episode has been so far.
Ooh, that's a good question. My favorite episode we've done so far is the episode where we talked about Boogie Nights, because that's my favorite film of all time. It was really fun to, show those guys the film because they had never seen it before and kind of, hear their thoughts about it, even if they didn't make me so happy because they didn't like it as much as me. And it's also just, I think we talked about some other fun stuff on that episode, but I just really remembered having a really good conversation about Boogie Nights. The Taxi Driver episode is really good too.
Yeah, I was going to say the Taxi Driver episode was my favorite. And if I recall correctly, your co-host did not share your passion for Taxi Driver either.
No, not a fan. So there's been some conflicting opinions, which makes for a good podcast in my opinion.
That's true. So can you tell us a little bit more about being the vice president for UC Film Society? What's that been like?
It's been interesting. I've been working with Ollie pretty closely since he became president, even when I wasn't vice president, because there wasn't a lot of activity in the Film Society before we started the radio show, I feel like. So it's been, ramping up with like doing the radio show and trying to create more events around that. But it's been good to kind of, meet the different people of the, film industry if we get the chance to on certain activities or certain sets. And it's kind of cool to, have larger discussions with not just the three people on the show, but, everyone in the Film Society. It's been interesting planning different events around film. I really have enjoyed my time. And, this third year, Ollie, our president, will be gone. And I think me and Cam are planning on co-presidenting together. So that'll be fun. And hopefully it will lead to more events and, bigger things for the Film Society.
Yeah, that sounds great. Did you know that I was there the day that Ollie got voted in as president?
I do remember that, yeah. I think that was one of the first days I met you. So
That wouldn't surprise me, actually. I just distinctly remember being the only one who voted for Tom because I was like, if no one votes for Tom, I'm going to feel so sad for him. So I'm just going to vote for Tom to be president. And I was the only one.
that day was so weird because I was like a first year and I was like, what am I doing here? Like I really wanted to be in the film society, but I didn't feel prepared to like, cast my vote on like who should run this because I didn't know anyone.
Yeah, that was also the day that I stood down as treasurer as well.
Have you had any experience yet in the film industry, film scene in Canberra, or?
I've worked on a lot of sets, but it's been mostly, student sets, helping friends out with their projects or, kind of working on my own things. But yeah, this year in specific, I directed and wrote a short film with my friend Noah, who's in my group, and a bunch of other people who are in my group. But we kind of like directed and wrote it together. That was really fun. We got a really good experience on that, working with some real Canberra actors and, real sets, because we were kind of like at this restaurant Terra in the city. Thankfully, they let us shoot there, kind of designing different, rooms. And, it was a pretty big, it's like the biggest film I worked on so far. And we're in the editing stages of that now. So I've gotten a lot of experience this year in specific, just in terms of that film, just on how to work with actors and how to like, command the set, which is something I really want to do. And, obviously writing it was so much fun and, learning how to, tell that story. I've gotten a lot of experience, nothing really on like, professional set just yet. It's mostly been student stuff, but hopefully that'll happen sometime next year or in the future. Mostly been focusing on just, smaller projects now, but it's been good to get that experience. I'll take experience on anything.
Yeah, so you're going to go into writing and directing?
Yeah, writing is my mainstay. I've always loved writing. I've done a lot of creative writing elective courses, and screenwriting is something I gravitated towards pretty early when I decided I wanted to do film. It's only coming to uni that I was like, I want to direct too, because I do find it hard. This might sound like I have a bit of an ego, but I don't. But it's like I find it a bit hard to like write something and then, have someone else direct it. Like it doesn't feel like that's going to be my story.
Less genuine, less what you.
And when I write, I see it in my
thing.
head, and I'm like, I need to, tell this as well.
I think that doing both is really smart because from what I've seen in the industry, the most tense film sets I've ever worked on has been when you have a different director to who wrote it, because they just fight
different
constantly
visions.
because they have such different visions. So I definitely think that's great that you want to see your projects through from start to finish.
And that's why working on this short film this semester with a co-director and a co-writer was really good, because you got to get that experience of working with someone, which is something you're inevitably going to have to do, is work with someone. And thankfully we worked really well together. Sometimes you might not work as well with that person, but sometimes you might just still have to do it. And it's good to learn and build early on doing that. Obviously that's not my intention, but we kind of had to for the assignment, but like I love doing it still. So it's like, I don't know. It's good to have that experience.
Well, I'll ask you then, because you are from the USA and it is a topical issue of the time at the moment. And the fact that you want to be a writer. So I'd imagine you're pretty familiar with all the complications occurring at the moment with films, such as the writers and actors strikes and everything. So I was just wondering if you had any opinions or thoughts surrounding such a topical issue for your prospective future career.
Yeah, I know they got a good deal recently, and I hope that stays the same until I hopefully go into that field. I want, my fellow writers and myself and, writers that I love and admire to, get paid what they deserve. Writers are obviously in such a huge, important aspect of filmmaking as everyone else is, but like these stories need to be recognized, and I think they're really important. And I think, making sure that they're protected in their contracts and, getting paid the right amount and seeing the numbers is really important. And I really hope that, this deal that they got stays the same and hopefully shows that like, they're not messing around and there's many moving aspects to, film obviously, but like writers, it's where it starts,
Do you have a favorite writer?
Yeah, I have tons. Aaron Sorkin is one of my favorite writers of all time. The Social Network is one of my favorite scripts of all time. Paul Thomas Anderson is an amazing writer, but I think of him more as a writer-director, but some of his scripts like Boogie Nights, like I said, is one of my favorites. I love Quentin Tarantino, obviously. I love the Coen brothers. All amazing writers right there. So, yeah.
So I'm assuming then that you don't think, well, part of the strike was because of the use of AI and how people are starting to think that AI would be able to take over the job of a writer. I'm assuming you'd have pretty strong opinions on that.
Yeah, I hate AI, and in terms of art, I just think it's against the point. Art and writing specifically is all about coming from a person's original creative brain, and AI is literally the opposite of that. I think AI is useful in some areas of film, perhaps like previs on graphic designs, or certain areas, but maybe not the writing side of things, or I don't know.
I feel like you'd eventually get to a point where they just create the same story over and over again, just in slightly different.
Who wants to see that? What I love most about film is like seeing a part of someone's brain projected onto the screen or onto the page.
So, what are some of the key differences that you've seen in the film culture between Australia and the US?
So I didn't love movies until I moved to Australia. Like I enjoyed movies, but I truly developed a love for film when I moved to Australia. But I feel like there's a true, even more so of a passion in America for film. And, I feel like that's just maybe because America's, a bigger, and it's where it all happens. But I don't see a lot of, people, going out and, making events out of film here. Obviously it happens, but I feel like that's such a big thing in America. And I don't know, I feel like I can talk to people about movies in America a lot more. There's a lot of films that some people here haven't seen that I just feel like you would expect someone to see. Maybe that's just me knowing like, certain film people in America and film people in Australia, and just like the amount of opportunities people in America get to see films, perhaps that could make the difference.
So with that, would you then want to move back to the US when you're trying to become a writer? Do you think there's more opportunity there or here?
There just is, like, that's just a fact. There's a lot of opportunities here as well. Like, I'm not trying to say that there's not, because there definitely is. But yeah, my plan is to move back to America because that's where most of the movies get made. But yeah, there's definitely opportunities here, and, it can get done here. I'm not saying I need to move back to be successful, but one, it's just where I'm familiar. It's where, my heart is, in terms of like, I'm from New York. I was born in New York, and, there's so many cool New York movies out there. I'm like, I just want to be there making movies, because that's just the place to be, or LA. So yeah, that's my plan.
So I'll ask you then, do you think that there is a lot of potential for growth for the film industry in Australia in the coming years, or do you think it's already reached its potential?
Oh, no, there's going to be so much opportunity for growth. One of the biggest horror movies this year was an Australian, film, Talk to Me, by 2 YouTube directors. And they work with A24, which is one of the biggest, production companies of indie films. And, they're moving into some bigger films now. So I think people saw that and was like, oh my God, Australian filmmakers, there's going to be so many more voices coming out just off that alone. I feel like it's going to continue to grow and grow. And I'm excited to see where it goes, especially because now I have so many friends in Australia that want to, stay in Australia and make movies here.
So tell us a bit about growing up in New York. And I mean, I know that your dad has ties to the theatre industry. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that was like growing up in New York.
Yeah, sounds great. It was amazing. My dad's worked in theater production for as long as I can remember. I think forever, pretty much. He's always been into theater. And, through that, I got to experience a lot of shows, not necessarily film, but, shows. And I'd see behind the scenes, and I'd see how things got made. And I'd see, a lot of art from an early age. And, my dad was also always showing me movies he loved because, theater and film are pretty closely linked. It's storytelling. All of it is. It's this kind of the same thing. So he would show me films he loved, and, both seeing plays like musicals, like films, really got me obsessed with stories. And, seeing behind the scenes was like, oh, I got to see how it got made as well. And being in New York where you could see it all is awesome. And, so I loved to go into the movies when I was a kid. I wasn't necessarily familiar with movies, that I love now, like older foreign films or, classic, Hollywood films. I was much more of a Harry Potter and franchise kid, but that's definitely an entryway that people need, and I feel like is necessary in our day and age to get into filmmaking, because those are, very important stories and very important films. And,
Everyone starts somewhere.
Everyone starts somewhere, exactly. And through that, I kind of wanted to see how things got made in the film industry and myself, and, and kind of just wanted to tell my own stories like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that growing up around theatre is what an element of why you have a passion for writing in particular? Because it, like you said, it's storytelling across the board, no matter what you're working with.
I actually wouldn't say so. I'd say the theater side of it really just influenced my behind the scenes nature of it, because my dad worked in production, so I got to thankfully see a lot of that. But I'd say more so just my dad showing me the films got me into writing. And, I also read a lot of books as a kid because of, that. My dad would, impart a lot of books upon to me. So, yeah.
Okay, so here's a question for you then. Why film and not theatre? Why did you decide that you wanted to go into film instead of carry on the family legacy in theatre?
So I think the visual aspect of film is why I got into it. Theater obviously is very stagey, so there's not a lot of, camera work involved. You're seeing it live, and I think I like the camera work behind the films, and the visual aspect of it as well. I like the combination between the writing side of things and, the visual, and being able to combine those to tell a compelling story. Like, a script's great, but if you can tell a story behind the camera as well, I think that's really impressive. And I wasn't drawn to that until like 2019, when I really got into film and like classic films, where that is such a mainstay, that I only realized that. And I think that's the biggest draw of it. And in the writing as well, like when you're writing things for a theater, it has to be like all on the page. You have to say what the actor is thinking at all times, what the character is thinking, and in films you don't necessarily have to do that. That can be conveyed through a camera angle or a moment in just non-spoken. There's a lot of room for the non-spoken, which I think is what draws me in about film a lot, even though I love writing and I love good writing.
That sounds more of the director coming out in you, where like you're writing something on the page but you know exactly how it's going to be shot to convey that kind of emotion without having to specifically state it.
Yeah, the visual story as well as the verbal.
Yeah, both are key, and I think some of my favorite films blend that, the best.
All right, well, thanks, Jake, for joining us today. So, everyone, take note. Listen to Off Camera and the rest of the Listening to Canberra Voices series. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and thanks for listening.